This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember, no one can be a boy wonder forever.
Batman needs a team that can operate on the sly. You will be that team. I will deploy you on missions.
Real missions?
Yes, but covert. You'll do it on lead terms.
What are we waiting for?
This team is not a social club.
Young Justice.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 215 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we are wrapping up our special Elseworlds month here, and we've got one more alternate animated take on the Boy Wonder himself to wrap us up.
That is right, Liam, and we left it up to the fans. That's right. You voted, we listened. And much to Liam's chagrin, as the prophecy spoke and it did indeed come to pass, we are once again reviewing Young Justice, which we say that sort of tongue-in-cheek as Liam has, neither of us have any problem with Young Justice. Mm-mm. In fact, we've reviewed several episodes thus far and have enjoyed them. You can check those out in the archives at DCAUreview.com. But ironically, there is one sticking point and one thing, Liam, that you have pointed out every time that we have reviewed a Young Justice episode. And ironically, it's directly linked to our Elseworlds topic for the month, Robin the Boy Wonder.
That's right. Yes, while I would definitely enjoy this show for the most part. It's a fun change of pace from our normal main DCAU continuity. The one character I would say I'm not a huge fan of, at least in this first season, which is all we reviewed so far have been first season episodes. I'm not a huge fan of this version of Robin. I think it's just one of those things, once I noticed it, it was hard to unnotice. And most of his personality seems to be trying to do wordplay. And just making up words.
Which continues for this episode. The theme
sure does.
Theme continues.
But we'll get into all of that in our plot, Cal, in just a moment here. But before we get into our main categories, I of course must read our official Imdb synopsis for this week's episode, Homefront, which I will get to. Of course, this synopsis reading is brought to you by the Pod Tower YouTube channel, where you can not only find every episode that we do, but also lots of content from other great DCAU content creators. So even if you're not listening to the show regularly on YouTube, if you could go up and subscribe there, you're not only helping us out, but some other fine folks as well. And Cal, are you ready for the synopsis?
I am, yes. This episode originally debuted here in the States on the Cartoon Network back on September the 30th, 2011, meaning we just passed the 10-year anniversary last September, coming up here on the 11-year anniversary in just a few short months here.
That is right. So without further ado, here is the synopsis for Homefront, which was written by John Wiseman, directed by Michael Chang, with music by the Dynamic Music Partners and animation by MOI Animation. And that synopsis reads as such. When the cave is attacked, can Artemis and Robin, the two teams without superpowers, save the team or even themselves from the unknown invaders?
Oh, it's not a statement, it's a question this time.
We went like Adam West Batman announcer at the end of part one here. We don't we pose it as a question.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, Cal, that will bring us into our first category here, which is our plot. And as we sort of run down as we always do, we open with a little bit of a flashback as we see a young Artemis talking things over with her sister. It's clear that their home life is not great, and in fact her sister is planning to leave And then we sort of flash forward to present day, where Artemis is attending a new high school in none other than Gotham City. A precocious, annoying young man walks up to her and snaps a picture. It's not really a selfie if there's two people in it, I don't think, but snaps a picture.
They still
of the
call it a selfie. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. It's not. It should be an ussy or something like that. Now I'm just doing Robin shtick. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Apology accepted.
Artemis, I'm Bet, your new student liaison. Welcome to Gotham Academy. Thanks, I'm Artemis. But you knew that.
We'll laugh about this someday.
Who's that? A freshman. Ignore him. Dick? What was that about?
Nothing, Barbara. Just being friendly to the new girl.
But yes, we get some quirky little dialogue as Dick Grayson, of course, aware of who she really is, takes that picture and then alerts a fellow classmate named Barbara that he's just trying to be friendly to the new girl. And we have a kind of a brief interlude in the cave of the team's hideout, where we see that Superboy and Miss Martian and Kid Flash are all sort of hanging around. Superboy and Miss Martian still trying to keep their relationship a secret from Kid Flash and the rest of the team. And then we see that Aqualad and Red Tornado are discussing, not only are they discussing the potential for a mole, a secret double agent to be part of the team, but also that Red Tornado, who's sort of taken over as the team's chaperone by this point in the series, is being called away to monitor duty. So we've got a real Home Alone situation brewing here.
So you have told no one else of this mole?
I cannot be sure one exists. And if it does, if the team is being betrayed from within, I must investigate without tipping my hand. But perhaps I should tell Batman?
Generally, the Batman expects the team to handle its own problems. But the decision is yours. I will return after monitor duty on the watchtower.
I thought you were exempt from monitor duty since becoming our den mother.
Recognized. Red Tornado 1-6.
I agreed to cover for Green Arrow. He has an interpersonal event with Black Canary. A hot date.
Yeah. So they also, by the way, there's a brief conversation between them about this mole that they've discovered may be on their team that they're attempting to find out. But that is sort of left for another time. And we see Robin and Artemis at this point running into each other in an alley. And they Robin, of course, is aware of who Artemis is. Artemis is not aware that Dick Grayson is Robin, apparently. So there's this playful bit where Robin asks her what she's doing in town, and she specifically in Gotham City, and she makes up a story about seeing her cousin in a spelling bee that Robin sort of chides her about. So they both arrive at that point with a purpose of going down to the cave. And once they both are teleported into the cave, it's a big disaster. They find themselves right in the middle. It's basically like that scene in Community. You've probably seen it in GIF form where Donald Glover walks into the room holding the pizza and there's just fire everywhere. Mm-hmm. Or if you're a Community fan, you know that scene specifically. That's basically what happens when they get teleported into this room. Everything is on fire, and they're trying to determine what the source of said fire is, but it seems to be spreading rapidly and, in fact, chasing them. They can't seem to find any of the other members of the team. And for the next several scenes, it is Robin and Artemis doing their best to try and escape this onslaught of both water and fire that seem to be attempting to kill them. And they find their way through various different tunnels and different air vents, and they're finding their way throughout to the various different parts of the manor. And they, of course, are still attempting to figure out. Robin downloads schematics of the cave in an attempt to try and hack into the system and to better avoid this whatever this is that's coming after them. We only get a quick visual. We'll talk talk about just a little bit here, but a shadowy figure in the midst of this flame, as well as a spiraling flame tornado that is coming after them, which is sort of a little hint as to what it exactly is that they're dealing with here. But after they are able to escape the shower that was attempting to drown them, and then the fire that was attempting to come after them, they jump up one of the hoods inside of the kitchen, and they make their way through the air vent. Robin is sort of hacked into the visuals of the cave, looking through the cameras and attempting to figure out just what happened to them, and who led this attack and what happened to the other members of the cave specifically. And it appears that the cameras were taken out all at exactly pretty much the same time, so they're not able to identify their attackers.
Locking out Cave's motion and heat sensors to prevent the enemy from tracking us.
And I ask again, who is the enemy?
Let's find out. Downloading Cave security footage. There.
Dork wrench. Thank you, Green Cheeks.
I have been meaning to ask, any problem juggling schoolwork with your responsibilities here?
Nope. Juggling's just one of my many talents. Socket wrench.
Daily cheerleading practice has presented a challenge. Oh, but my first loyalty is always to the team. This team, not the bumblebees.
Artemis starts school today. Do you think she will have trouble maintaining her loyalties?
Nah, she'll manage all right. I mean, how much more hostile and annoying?
What happened?
Explosion took out the camera. I'll find another angle. That's it. All four are dead. The cameras. I meant the cameras. I'm sure the others are okay.
So they do see that it appears that the rest of the team is safe, but it's not really clear what exactly happened to them as this onslaught all occurred at the same time. So they actually sneak out, and they are in this library. They're looking for this secret passage to get down deeper, and they hear a very familiar voice reach out to them that Artemis seems to believe may be Red Tornado, when in fact we actually get the reveal of who our two main antagonists for the episode are.
That's right, as they are briefly referred to as Red Tornado's siblings. I think later on in the series they are officially named as Red Torpedo and Red Inferno, but basically it's a lady Red Tornado robot who does fire, and a beefier male robot with slightly different chest designs or insignia on him, and he's the water robot. So we have wind, of course, with Red Tornado, and now fire and water as well. So the two non-powered teens are in quite a bit of trouble as that sort of continues, and they are trying to continue making it through. They find a hidden passage out of the library, and as you said, they're able to sort of finally make contact with the rest of the team, as Aqualad alerts him that Aqualad and Miss Martian are both being kept in this sort of cage of fire by the fire robot, and Superboy and Kid Flash are sort of encased in this like metal. Some sort of strange metal thing. I don't know if it was melted onto them. I forget. Do we actually see how they were put into these?
They're just there.
they're in these sort of. They're both sort of unable to move, and there's water slowly rising around them. As in fact, the tornado robots use the intercom system to alert Robin and Artemis that they have less than 10 minutes to turn themselves in, or otherwise all of their friends will be killed. And that sort of creates our race against time here, as Robin and Artemis again are sort of accosted by both the torpedo and the Inferno robots, and they're just able to get out of there. And finally that Robin sort of hatches an idea as he's sort of talking things out with Artemis and some of the other team members, that the best way they can deal with this is, of course, what better way to do it than the way all problems are solved in superhero and sci-fi television shows? An EMP blast.
What do we do now? We save them. That's how it works. Maybe that's how it's supposed to work, but those robots already took out our 4 super-powered friends. You seem distraught. Distraught? Bagan is dying! We have no powers, and I'm down to my last arrow. Of course I'm distraught! We'll get traught or get dead. How can you be so calm? Practice. Been doing this since I was 9. What good is that now? What chance do we have against unrelenting machines? Oh, duh! They're machines. And one electromagnetic pulse will shut down any machine within range. Great! Except you better have an EMP emitter in your utility belt, because I know I don't have one in my quiver. I'm fresh out, but I'm betting we can make one. What do you say, KF? Doable? Totally doable.
5 minutes.
You know, if you had more time.
Well, of course, you know, if there's a robot in the area, an EMP it's your reset button. You know, that's how you get everything back to normal. So Robin has, as you mentioned, has the idea, and he radios Kid Flash, who walks him through the process of figuring out how to build an EMP, which is interesting because the first thing that Kid Flash says is that it would work perfectly if they had more time, but then the time aspect is never mentioned again, and Robin pretty successfully builds an almost complete EMP in just a few minutes. So he's able to gather some pieces from around the cave and build this EMP and fashion it together. Only to just when he's about to set it off, realize that it's missing a piece. It's not quite working. There's some part of it is missing, and in what is maybe the most video game like piece of dialogue in this entire episode, after Robin has built the EMP with various different pieces, there's something missing from this, which is like if you're playing the video game at home telling you that you need to go on another mission to find a piece. But yeah, in the meantime, they discover that there's a piece that's missing, and there's time is beginning to continue to tick down. So after realizing that it doesn't work, he realizes that he needs a conductor and something to kind of conduct the energy to come out of it. So unfortunately, before they're able to find a conductor, they're spotted by the 2 robots, and Artemis runs away, and Robin is caught, and Artemis checks out looking through the vent and sees that Robin is being drowned. So it's a good moment for Artemis, who then ultimately curls up in a ball at this point, and she appears to be having some PTSD. She sneaks out of the air vent back to the library, where she sees the collected masks and helmets, the trophies that the team has begun to collect. And she looks at this Cheshire Cat mask, and she again is transported back to that scene from the original, from the first scene of the episode, and where she's talking to her sister about abandoning the family, and her sister makes the choice to abandon the family, while Artemis decides that she needs to stay and wait for her mom to be released from prison. So she realizes that she has a new family now, that this is the family she needs to stick with, and she needs to again be there for them in a way that maybe her sister wasn't, and show the care for the family, the same care that she showed her mom. So she decides, she picks up an arrow actually that was part of from another episode that I believe that was used to help defeat Amazo in another episode. So she picks up this arrow, and she heads back in, and she decides she's going to feign surrendering to the robots, and that's kind of where we kick off the finale of the episode. Is everything looks to be hopeless as the water continues to rise, and the heroes, Aqualad and Miss Martian, stuck inside this cage of fire, are beginning to continually weaken, and Robin appears to be drowned, laying on the ground. That's where we get the final part of this scene here.
Yeah, she does. Artemis is able to sort of lull the robots into a false sense of security, and then she is able to kind of do this tremendous acrobatic move and fire the arrow. And of course, the spearhead of the arrow is in fact made of metal, so it's the perfect conductor for Robin's EMP device. And she hits the target, quite literally in this case, and the EMP disabling the two robots and saving the day. Of course, at that point, not only does the fire cage that was keeping Aqualad Martian disappear, but the water begins to subside, and Superboy and Kid Flash are freed, and we sort of as everyone's sort of recovering, we see Artemis go up to Robin, and we quickly realize that he is in fact still breathing despite the other robot's best efforts, and we find out that was actually the whole time Robin's plan, according to him, was that he would pretend to get captured or let himself get captured, and that would allow Artemis the time to save the day. So we seems like we're wrapping everything up, but of course they're trying to get Superboy and Kid Flash unstuck, and they're trying to use this laser drill, but of course the EMP knocked all electronics in the area out, so she can't Artemis can't quite get that working. In the meantime, Red Tornado returns, as he says when he realized that he couldn't make contact with the cave. He teleported down to another area of the country, and then flew all the way there to I guess this is the West Coast. They probably say it in the pilot episode, and I just forget. But he implies that it was a distance away. So he finally gets there right as the action has ended, and they're sort of continuing to discuss the aftermath. And just as Red Tornado goes to investigate the two robots, his apparent siblings, who he says he was completely unaware of having any sort of familial relations, the laser drill starts to work, which at first Artemis is excited, but then Robin, of course, realizes that means if that electronic device is working, then so will the. So as Red Tornado reaches down to touch one of them, we see this little electrical charge, and then all three of the robots' eyes glow red, and Red Tornado sort of turns against the team, sucks all of the oxygen out of the room to knock all of the team. And when they come to, they see Superman, Batman, Aquaman, Green Arrow, all the adults finally make themselves useful as they show up here in the final scene to note that all three of the Red Tornado family have gone and disappeared on us.
Artemis, can you hear me? She's all right. What happened here?
What happened? The Reds happened! Tornado and his... Wait, where are they?
Gone. All three of them. Gone.
And we get quite the dramatic cliffhanger ending here. So just when we thought things were wrapping up and we had our happy ending and we learned our lesson about family and teamwork and all that, they go and pull the rug right out from under us and then tell us we got to come back.
Yeah, there's a bit of a cliffhanger there. So needless to say, we will not be continuing this thread next week because we're starting a new month. So if you're interested in knowing what happens next, we invite you to check out the wonderful HBO Max app. It's a great, absolutely great application, especially if you're looking to get the entirety of the DC animated universe and other universes from DC. So, but yeah. So I guess, Liam, we can talk about our scores and what we liked from the plot. So I will say there's a lot of Robin in this episode, which is obviously why we picked it. I don't have as much of an issue with Robin as you seem to, or the characterization of this Robin in this show. I will say that there were parts that I felt like when I was dropped into the episode, like maybe I had missed something with Artemis' past. They sort of kind of bring you back into it. It's not readily clear to me what that scene at the beginning and her dreaming about that, how that related to everything. And of course, it eventually ties back in. But yeah, it's very strange that they just sort of, and I get it, it's an episodic series, so they want you to come back to the next episode, but there's no clear reason for why this has happened, how these characters got there. It just feels very much like you're dropped in the middle of something. And again, I get we are dropped in the middle of this series. We've jumped over several episodes since the last one that we reviewed, but it very much feels like this is not a show that you can just watch it one episode of and come in and completely understand everything that's happening. So there were parts of it that I felt like it's like maybe what happens if a kid hasn't watched the prior 4 or 5 episodes, or you have missed a couple episodes? And I was trying to think, I feel like they're at the beginning of at least, the 2-parters in the DCAU, you at least get a previously on, and you kind of get a quick synopsis to catch you up to speed if you did miss, something from the prior episodes. You at least get some sort of recap to bring you into why these points are going to happen in this episode. So maybe that's just me nitpicking for something that's like, all right, well, I'm not as familiar with the series as I am with the DCAU stuff, so I'm being dropped into this brand new place. Please dumb it down for me. But because of that, at times it did just feel like it was a little bit, I don't know. It was hard to figure out why things were happening and where things were coming from, or what the purpose of certain things were. I think the action is fun. There's a lot of fun action. I think the chase scene seems to last a little bit too long, as it always is in a superhero cartoon or any comic book. The fact that the villains gave them 10 minutes to figure out how to defeat them essentially was a little bit ridiculous, especially when it's 2 robots. They don't have any sort of human reason to give these other two people a reason to stay alive. So why are you adding 10 minutes on to killing the other ones that you have dead to rights? The chase scene's fun. I like the idea that they gave this Artemis character the ability to overcome her fears and to connect her past and recognize where that plays out in her present. I like that she was ultimately the one that recognized that this new team is her, as Dom from Fast and Furious would say, family, for lack of a better word. So she needs to protect them. So there was some fun stuff there. Overall, it's a fine 20 minutes of television. I didn't think there was anything earth-shattering, other than her maybe dealing with a little bit of anxiety, because I don't know if that's something that you tend to see. I know that in Justice League versus the Fatal Five, you start to bring in some of that mental health aspect of and adding that dimension to your superhero characters, and that's not something we necessarily see in some of those older episodes. So I do appreciate that, but it's only for a split second, and it's kind of, it's tied back into her feeling like she owes this to them versus, hey, she's having a mental health crisis. This is kind of real. So for all those reasons, I ended up just settling on a 6 out of 10 for plot. What about you?
I went 1 point higher. I went 7 out of 10. I do agree that there's obviously things afoot here that would probably mean a lot more to us if we were watching this series from start to finish. I will say, as an episode, I think just the concept of you take all of the heavy hitters down almost where it starts, and it's just Robin and Artemis thrown into the deep end, so to speak, and having to kind of use their wits. And then I think even the way it's structured, where Robin is, it's sort of the point of contention almost between the two of them in the episode, is that he is so calm and he's still doing normal Robin things for the series, right? He's still doing his little quips and wordplay and sort of just treating this like any other case or any other mission that this team has gone on. Meanwhile, all their friends are in grave danger, and she kind of pushes him and questions him on that, and he says it's because he's been doing this since he was 9, and that he's just been for every situation, and so nothing really phases him. So to have it be like, okay, he's the guy you want if there's a zombie invasion or something, right? Or in this case, a robot invasion, because he's calm and he's collected, and and he's got all the gadgets and he's got a plan and he's keeping everything moving. And then all of a sudden he's taken off the board at the last second. And now the person who's been losing their mind and has been really freaked out and has felt sort of out of their depth the whole episode, now she has to step up. I think that's good. And then you contrast that with her own real, blood relation family walking out on her when things got tough, and her sort of faced with that same choice of whether she could basically hole up in this trophy room and wait and hope for the League to show up and save her, but that if she did that it would mean the death of all of her teammates, and her ultimately deciding to go back and to kind of outsmart the robots and save the day. I think there's enough there that you can sink your teeth into, even without the broader context that we're missing by not watching these episodes in order. I think there's still enough there where you can sink your teeth into that, and it's a fun and it's still a fun and exciting adventure. And and then Robin gets knocked out at the end, so that's fun.
Yeah, you do have three uninterrupted. You have 3 uninterrupted minutes of no dialogue. So,
well, really, I think what I appreciated was also that Artemis was just like constantly calling him out for being so annoying in times of crisis. I appreciated that as well. So, yeah, overall, maybe not the highest of high plot scores that we could give, but 7 from myself and a 6 from you, Cal. Still, nothing to sneeze at here as we begin to wrap up our plot here and move on to our second category, which of course is visuals. And because, Cal, as you would know if you've been listening and you just heard our plot recap, there's no B plots here. There's not a lot of downtime. So this is a very very fast moving, very visual focused episode. So we got a lot to break down in this category.
Yeah, that it is. It's actually done pretty beautifully. I would say this is some of the smoothest, cleanest animation. I think it's very much a hot pursuit and a lot of action heavy. As soon as they get teleported into the cave and things get going there, it's action heavy and like I said, it's this constant Robin and Artemis running away while also trying to set traps to potentially foil the person or whatever this entity is that's creating this havoc within the cave. So there's a lot of running and jumping and hiding and jumping up into vents and figuring out how, there's one point where they head to the showers and they try to set off all the showers at the same time, and then all of a sudden the room starts to flood, so then he has to blow a hole in the wall, and then Robin's constantly using his wrist computer to attempt to hack and figure out the cave schematics or check out the footage from the surveillance videos. And so there's a lot that happens here constantly. We have that we mentioned the flame cage, I guess, the cage of flames that Miss Martian and Aqualad are trapped in. The fire, I thought, actually was one of the things that I noticed, and I felt like that even though it may be CG, I couldn't quite point it out and say this looks like that classic weird, not quite fiery computer generated fire. I think if it was computer generated, there was cell shading over top of it, but it gave it that unique look that far more like Eastern animation style of fire or something that you would see in an anime. So it fits in with this style of character work, but it also, I think, fits in really well and didn't really stand out because there's a lot of fire in this. You have an entire character whose power set is based around fire, and conversely, you have the other antagonist power set set around water and being able to control that. So you have these two dynamic things that really have to be able to flow and look like the entities they're representing, even in animated form. Otherwise, it's gonna really stand out in the episode. And I thought both of those things stood out as being well animated for the episode. I will say I really liked the designs of both Red Inferno and Red Tornado, or Red Torpedo rather. Red Torpedo definitely gives off much like he just kind of looks like I don't know, the Crime Syndicate version of Red Tornado or something like that. Like it's not that different than Red Tornado, but I thought that Red Inferno, her design actually really invoked some, if you're familiar with the original Ralph McQuarrie Star Wars concept art, there's a pretty famous concept art that he was the guy that originally designed basically what Star Wars was going to look like. And there's a very famous drawing that he did of C-3PO, the human cyborg from Star Wars, that very much that facial structure and that very sort of pronounced brow and squared off nose is very much invoked in that drawing. So I thought that maybe that could have been lifted from that directly. It's not that far off from being a robot, obviously both robot kind there. So I really liked their designs, and I thought that they were set apart enough to be individuals where it wasn't hard to differentiate between the two of them on screen. But it was also, you could clearly see that they were supposed to be quote unquote related, and also related back to Red Tornado. So I thought that keeping that design thread similar while also differentiating them enough to make them unique, it was a tightrope to walk, and I thought was done really well. But I think the last thing that I'll point out, and I'll throw it back over to you, is regarding back to Red Inferno's first sort of appearance, is when they're chasing Robin and Artemis, and you're still not quite sure who this perpetrator of this attack is. And the first thing that you see is this darkened silhouette in the midst of the fire, just sort of looking around, very creepy. And we'll talk about it in just a second with music and sort of the sound design for the episode. But it's very horror movie-esque. It's designed to be this mysterious pursuit from this evil character after your main characters. So I thought that was very that invoked some very horror movie-esque imagery in doing that, and I thought that was done really well.
Yeah, I totally agree with not surprisingly with almost everything you said there. Yeah, I think it's a really, really strong episode. I think that initial the flooding of the corridors, when they're sort of on the run, and sort of every time they get away from one of the robots, the other one's there. Like they're running from the fire tornado, and then they run to the shower and sort of turn the water on to try to keep themselves from burning alive. And then all of a sudden the pipes burst and that room floods, and they're right back to square one there. So I like the way they're sort of constantly kept on their toes. The sequence where I think they're in the hallway and it floods for the second time, where Robin pulls out this rebreather, and you see that Artemis is kind of panicking, so he gives it to her, and so they're sort of having this moment. But then here comes Red Torpedo back after them, and grabs a hold. Again, you talk about like horror movie moments where he sort of grabs Artemis's ankle, and she's sort of struggling to get away from him, and then Robin has to sort of quickly swim and stab it in the eye. Again, we've talked about this in a lot of our reviews. When you have a robot or something, you can do horrible, violent things that you can't get away with on a human target here. So he gets stabbed in the eye for his troubles, and then sort of as you sort of have this close up, and as the robot pulls the arrow out of his eye, it sort of pans back out, and you see all of these explosives that Robin has left in the water behind him. I thought that was a really neat sequence and animated really well. Totally agree with you about it can be really it can be a little finicky when you're animating water and fire, especially this much of it, both sequences that are happening underwater and then yes, sort of the constant flickering fire that we see around the cages and all that, and even moments where you see the robot sort of intensify the cage, and you even see like detail where you see Aqualad sort of, not only does he put his head down and sort of grimace, but you see sort of the beads of sweat forming on him, and they really make that. And then that final bit there where Red Tornado comes back and all the eyes glow red, and then he sort of springs into action and starts sucking the air out of it. You sort of go around the room and see all the various team members sort of grasp at their throats as they sort of realize what's happening, and then sort of slowly pass out one by one. I think that's a really fantastic sequence as well. And then the slow-mo of that last arrow shot that Artemis gets off to conduct the EMP blast is pretty fun as well. Absolutely. She does like the big backflip. She like runs and jumps and backflips off of one of them and fires the shot, and then we sort of follow the arrow across the room as it lands, and you see like the little charge of electricity go through it, and we see this big sort of CGI wave, big blue wave to indicate the EMP, and everything shuts down. I think that's a really fun sequence there, and then Superboy and Kid Flash sort of bursting back out of the water as it begins to subside. There's a lot of really strong visuals throughout this series, but so I ended up giving visuals a really strong 9 out of 10 for this week.
Nice. I only went 1 point lower with mine, 8 out of 10. We highlighted a lot. It's visually a very stunning episode, and as you mentioned, because there's so much riding on the actual pursuit, there's no B plot. It's all about keeping the action and entertain. There's no real breathing points except for the momentary respite that Robin and Artemis initially get kind of in the air vent to try and collect themselves, and then again when Artemis sort of has her breakdown back in the air vent also. Those are really the only breathing like stop points, and even those are sort of punctuated by specific visuals with Artemis's flashback. And I think that they did a really good job, and I think it's reflected in our scores clearly.
Absolutely. And Cal, that will move us on to our third category, which of course is music. Once again, this week, some familiar names, as we have the dynamic music partners covering our musical themes for this week. And Young Justice is another show that doesn't really have a lot of like hummable character themes in the way that maybe our classic DCAU shows do. But as far as building that tension, I think you even touched on it a few minutes ago, but as far as building that tension, especially in the first part of this episode, I thought some really effective use of strings in those moments to really kind of build up that tension when we're not really sure what exactly is going on or who these mysterious attackers are.
Yeah. I the things that I had down, as you mentioned, kind of who, as they're trying to figure out who it is that's in hot pursuit, as soon as they land in the cave and things are it's absolute chaos. The music fills in the background there as they're sort of trying to evade and avoid the onslaught of fire that's coming after them. And then once they're in the showers and they start, the water starts filling up the room there, continues with that. I thought that I assume that some of this played into the musical choices, because I imagine it would be in the soundtrack if we were to listen to, and I think this is one of those soundtracks that may be available to check out. So if you're interested, you can might be able to find some of these tracks on YouTube or on a streaming service. But the sounds that sort of punctuate, at least initially, while Artemis and Robin are being pursued, as I said, evoked very much a horror movie soundtrack where you have these loud screeches and this, you may get one or two of like the Christopher Nolan womp hums, the Inception wonks or Inception horn. I forget what they call it. It's like the Inception horn. I think it's just that long, sustained, low horn blow. So you get some of those in the pursuit, and then sort of the high pitched sort of surprising screeches that you sometimes get in a horror movie soundtrack that are designed to evoke that surprise or that fear. So there isn't a lot, I don't think, that stood out. I think when Artemis releases the arrow too, that is backed by a track that sort of as you're following the arrow increases and sort of crescendos to the point where it lands and sets off the EMP and sort of invokes this sort of relief that the EMP is set off and the heroes have been rescued, at least temporarily. And then when Red Tornado touches the other robots, and it's sort of the music sort of comes back and begins to rise as all of the heroes' oxygen is being sucked out of them. So I don't think that it's very atmospheric, it's very scene specific that the soundtrack is for, but it's a good solid job. The parts that stood out were the ones that I mentioned, so I ended up giving music a 6 out of 10 for this week. What about you?
Yeah, I went just 1 point lower at 5 out of 10. I do agree with the sort of the ambiance of it, but I didn't really find a lot of like really dramatic, great points of music. Like I said, I think it adds effectively, but it tended to blend in the background a lot for me. So yeah, definitely nothing wrong with it, but nothing. Yeah, I think this show it's just coming again. Another part of coming into the show cold is, I think I don't necessarily know that we have a real sense of what exactly they were always going for with the sort of the musical motif of the series. But yeah, definitely some fun bits with the horns and the overall sound design of the episode. No doubt about that. And with that, Cal, that will bring us to our final category this week, which is of course our voice actors, and we have a decent sized cast, but most of them are pretty much minor players for this episode, except for our two main heroes. But we do, I will just mention, we briefly have Allison Stoner as she's playing both Barbara Gordon and Betty Kane. So 2 Batgirls for the price of 1 there. And then we have briefly Kelly Hu as Jade, who of course is the older sister of Artemis. We have Jeff Glenn Bennett, who we've talked about a few times, of course, the voice of Hardak on Batman the Animated Series, also the voice of Johnny Bravo and a lot of other classic 90s Cartoon Network cartoons, doing actually very similar to his Hardak here. He not only plays Red Tornado, but also the other, I think it's Red Torpedo, who's the other robot who speaks, but we have him on there for that. And as far as playing a disembodied, cold, emotionless robot, not surprisingly, he does a good job at that.
That's right. And ironically, Mr. Bennett is an Emmy Award winner for his portrayal of a different robot. Apparently, he won one for the show Transformers Rescue Bots. So, fun fact: the man plays a robot so well he won awards for it. So, enough said there. Yeah, whether it's him or Corey Burton in the DCAU or who plays him in Batman Brave and the Bold, I forget. Is it Corey Burton again?
Yeah, it's Corey Burton.
Yeah, so those two are 1 and 1A to me. I think when it comes to playing a soulless robot voice. So yeah, he's won probably more awards though than Corey Burton. Although Corey Burton has won the award of my heart. So it's pretty even.
Totally. And of course, we then have our main cast to talk about. We have briefly, we have Kari Payton as Aqualad. We have Jason Spizak as Kid Flash, Danica McKellar as Miss Martian, and then of course Nolan North pulling double duty as he often does as both Superboy and Superman. But most of those characters are kind of because of the nature of this episode, don't get much to do. I think Mr. Payton as Aqualad does get a little bit because he's kind of the one. The one still he has to convey that real sense of dread as he is sort of trying to comfort Miss Martian while he himself is in pretty dire straits. So he gets a little bit from the rest of our main cast here, as they're, because of the nature of the story, are kind of in the background this week.
Yeah, he has the little bit of dialogue also at the beginning that we mentioned that alludes to this mole in the team. So he has some dialogue with Mr. Bennett's Red Tornado also, and including some questioning of just why Red Tornado is responsible for for being on Watchtower duty when he was relieved of that role. So he does have some concern, and is sort of the spokesman for the team on behalf of them as they're conversing back and forth between Rob and Artemis as they're continually being checked on. They are in the more immediate danger when it comes to the fire cage. But yeah, there's not a lot for the rest of the team to do, and they're sort of, as you mentioned, relegated to background duty or giving, in the case of Wally West, just giving some basic instructions for Robin to collect certain items, and not much otherwise given to the individuals.
Absolutely. But speaking of which, we do have our two main players for the episode. We have Stephanie Lamellin as Artemis, and then Jesse McCartney as Robin. They have a lot to carry here because they're the only two characters who are conscious for most of this episode, and our villains are robots who don't talk a lot. So a lot for these two actors to carry this week.
That's right, Liam. And I would also like to give you the same advice that Robin gives Artemis, and that is to get Trot or get dead. Because Trot, you see, is the opposite of distraught, I guess. So
it's not a word.
If you're distraught, you should be Trot, because that's the opposite. What's the deal with people being distraught, but they're never actually Trot?
That's just his character. He's got one joke and he's just gonna run it into the ground here. But like I said, overall, I think there's some comedic value in the fact that it's mostly, as mentioned, Stephanie Lamellin just sort of reacting to his sort of calm, sarcastic demeanor while their lives are in danger. So them going back and forth with her being sort of over the top and very frantic in her dialogue, whereas Robin is just doing normal Robin stuff. I think that does create a fun dynamic, even if I don't particularly enjoy the content of Robin's dialogue.
Yeah, I think they do have some chemistry that play off each other pretty well. I think it's interesting also that the characters are written, as you mentioned, with Robin. This is sort of old hat for Robin. It's enjoyable for him because he kind of is putting pieces of the puzzle together to figure out who these people are, how they're going to defeat them. And Artemis, meanwhile, is going through this existential crisis of dread and PTSD of trying to figure out how she's going to survive. She doesn't have powers like the other people on the team do. She's not cut out to be a superhero. How is she going to, how is she, the only person left on the team, going to be responsible for saving the rest of them? So there's some lack of self-confidence from her, and some of that crisis, as well as the anxiety and when she actually curls up in a ball and is just like, I'm done. Like, it felt very authentic, especially from the performance of the voice actress. So I think content aside, goofiness aside, Seinfeld jokes aside, I think the performances are strong from both of them, and I thought that their chemistry was pretty good as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree there. I think Artemis, Miss Lamellin, kind of gets the big emotional beats of the episode, because again, it is sort of framed as this device of her remembering these horrible memories of her sister sort of abandoning her, and then her ultimately, despite her fear, despite her she basically has to put herself in danger to protect her new family at the end, and they kind of have her verbalize her whole thought process. There's a lot of and again, that comes back to, I think you just have to remember that this is, at the end of the day, still a kid's show, and so you do have her kind of spelling out exactly what she is thinking when she says that she's not going to abandon her new family the way that her sister had abandoned her. And despite that, it doesn't really come off as too like hackneyed or cliched or hammy there. I think she especially does a really good job. So yeah, I ended up settling on a pretty strong 7 out of 10 for my voice acting score this week.
Yeah, I went with the same exact score, and just because I don't think that there's one specific line, one specific moment that stood out as, wow, that was just incredible. I think with Robin and Artemis, they both do a solid job, and they carry the majority of the episode, but nothing stood out as like, man, that's deserving of a couple extra points there. So both still pretty strong with a 7 out of 10 regardless.
Absolutely, Cal. And as we begin to wrap up, that will bring us to the point where we tally up our final scores here. And with our 4 scores from our 4 categories all added together, Cal, it looks like I arrived at a final score of 28 out of 40.
Wow. And who would have thunk that you would have given a higher score for a Young Justice episodes that centered around Robin? Because I came in just a point lower with a 27 out of 40 with my scores. So you had a couple categories that were a little bit higher than me, so you ended up giving a better overall score there. So now I think it's safe to say, because we sort of briefly touched on it, this episode and the series links together pretty well. It's telling one's overall story arc here. So we have this cliffhanger that's left in this episode. There's the mention of the mysterious mole and the investigating work that Aqualad is doing to try and determine just who that is. So it feels like this one's a pretty important one to watch, because most in the series are important because they kind of all connect. So I'd say this is if you're watching Young Justice, pretty much every episode's 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, I think maybe if you've watched the series a whole bunch and we really are just talking about which ones you go back like, this is a classic one, and I know the series so well, I can just drop in on this one episode without context. I mean, I don't know. It probably depends on how much you enjoy the Robin and Artemis characters, but I think there is some fun stuff here, again, just from that sort of basic concept of the 2 non-powered characters having to fend off the super powered villains by themselves. I think that's fun. And then as far as where it connects into the larger series, if you're doing a full Young Justice rewatch, because of the way they sort of thread these little story beats even throughout episodes that aren't necessarily directly connected, I think this is a pretty easy thumbs up for rewatchability for this series.
There you go.
All right, Cal, and that will begin to wrap us up. Thank you, everybody, for listening, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or, of course, as I already mentioned, on the Pod Tower YouTube channel or any other app where you can find our show. We do appreciate it if you'd like to support the pod. The easiest and freest way to do that is, of course, to follow us on our various social medias. You can find us at DCAU Review, both on Instagram and on Twitter. And of course, if you head to our website, DCAUreview.com, you can also find our store and pick yourself up a hat or a sticker or a mug or something if you'd like to support us more directly financially. And definitely reach out to us on those social medias. Let us know what you think of this series, of this month. Do you want us to try to come back at some point and find like the direct threads of this episode where they pay off this Red Tornado stuff? We'd certainly take it under advisement if we heard from some of you. Again, thank you to everybody who voted both on Instagram and Twitter this week to help us pick this show. Even though I was kind of hoping we'd finally get to crack open the Teen Titans Go vault. Perhaps another day in another month we'll get to that, Cal. But
you know what you have to do? You have to skew the poll so it's either the Channing Tatum dog movie or Teen Titans Go, because at that point you can't lose.
That's right. Everything's coming up, Liam, if that's the case.
That's right. You got to set it up so that you're the victor either way.
That's right. So we'll plan that for a future month for sure. But as we begin to wrap up, Cal, as you mentioned, next week will be the start of a new month, and we will be returning to the DCAU proper, but not just any point in the DCAU. I believe, Cal, we'll be looking towards the future.
The future, Liam?
That's right. All the way to the year that's 50 years from now, whenever now is. That's right. We will be returning to not just Batman Beyond, but As was the case with our last future-themed month of the DCAU review, we have now broken the seal, and we will be alternating Batman Beyond and Zeta Project reviews all month long in July.
So Zeta fan, rejoice.
Oh, come on, there are dozens of them.
That's a valid point. Yes, it's gonna be a wonderful month for those dozens of Zeta fans.
That's right, and we will be picking things off with an episode of Batman Beyond, a pretty memorable one from what I can call back to, and that is an episode entitled Payback. So look for that next week, Cal. It's going to be a lot of fun. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll be back next week with another episode of the DCAU Review.
Adios.